mic and to turn it off when they have finished speaking. I have received apologies from Councillor Abbott, Councillor Oliver and Councillor Akhtar. Is anybody else?
You should have had apologies from Councillor Foley as well.
Thank you. Agenda item number 1, question from members of the public. I understand Mr. Jeff Nash has a question he would like to ask. Mr. Nash, can you please ask your question, indicating to whom you wish it to be put? And you have 5 minutes, sir.
The proposal of affordable retrofitting of cars to electric power. Bedford is transmogrifying for a healthier and more sustainable future. Hi, I'm Jeff Nash, a retired CNC machinist, a WA Challenge time-served man. I have been studying the subject of converting cars to electric power before and since my retirement for over 5 years. A big thank you for allowing me this time to address the esteemed council committee meeting, which Mr. Mohammed Yeltsin MP requested I should arrange, after he had put my proposal to the Secretary of State for the Environment, which I understand has been forwarded to the Department of Transport. I wish to speak to you about the proposal to improve our climate affordably. Climate change is not a narcolepsy subject, but a humongous wake-up call about the way we are living our lives. So if we are to avoid our children from experiencing starvation, we must learn from our mistakes and change our behaviour. Every solution idea for combating the overheated climate so far has an elephant in the room. To reiterate then, cut a long story short, as stated in my draft statement of 23rd of June, I have now attended the MOVE conference, which is all about ideas from all over the world coming together to deal with climate issues, and companies making pledges of goals to achieve by the next year's conference. The Movement conference is dealing, like the name suggests, with all matters relating to how we get around, including the redesigning of future city living. This took place at the famous Excel Centre, London, last month. At the MOVE conference, I met with Almeric Liberal, the founder and CEO of Transition One in France, who had kindly invited me to the conference at great expense to himself. Ticket prices are not cheap, but I learned so much from this conference and hope to attend again next year. The 3 options of my transmogrifying Bedford proposals are therefore, with your esteemed help, as follows. First option. It is to have Bedfordshire become the hub for the retrofitting of cars affordably in the UK by means of using the know-how of Cranfield and Bedford universities, along with Bedford College and even the U3A retired engineers.
Mr. Nash, you have 30 seconds, sir. You have 30 seconds to ask your question.
Sorry?
You have 30 seconds left to ask a question, sir.
Okay, my question is, can you please support my proposal? I have copies for the proposals to study.
Can you say who this question is to, sir?
Sorry?
Who are you asking this question to,
The
sir?
entire committee. It needs the help of Bedford.
Yeah,
Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's good. I think we have already spoken about transition one, haven't we? And thank you for coming along here this evening to express your concerns about climate change. If you have been in this chamber over the past year and more, you will know that we take climate change extremely seriously.
Can I?
Just wait till I finish that. Thank you, sir. Can you take your mic off, Mr. Nash?
Yes, sir.
That probably help actually. There we are, that's better. There we go. There we go. I was wondering why I was so quiet, unusually quiet. Yeah, so thank you for raising climate change. I know it was a decade ago the Mayor brought in his climate change fund, so climate change is something that's really important to all of us. I would raise just one note of caution, and that is that the answer to climate change isn't just giving everybody electric cars or even just converting cars to battery power, electric power. They have their own problems, not least the mining of lithium and nickel and copper and cobalt and manganese, all these horrible things that are mined all over the world, putting some people into slavery. The production of electric cars should be considered alongside the importance of increasing sustainable travel, and that's something which we're really geared up towards in this borough, so we want to encourage that very much. Now, in terms of this particular company, I have spoken to our department that works with encouraging economic growth in the borough, and they have certainly said that they would be most happy to work alongside any of the businesses who want to look at this particular proposal, and that's conversion of diesel and petrol vehicles to battery electric cars, by signposting to business support, opportunities for collaboration and product development, local intelligence and sectors of clusters for collaboration working with other industries in Bedford, of which many more are coming in all the time, and of course practical support of sourcing commercial property options and support with recruitment. So we will be happy to work not just with this company but also other companies. This is a French company that you've mentioned. There are of course other UK companies which are doing the same thing, encountering some difficulties, I have to say, because it's not as simple as converting the vehicle to electric and it suddenly becomes an EV and is, as noted by the DVLA, you have to register it and go through all kinds of hoops. And of course the government has just recently cut the subsidies for electric vehicles, which is, I think, a retrograde step if you want to encourage them. But nevertheless, we will do all that we can to work with them and you, sir, and thank you for coming along today and putting the case for this particular kind of technology. And I would encourage the Council to support me in that response.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Mr. Nash, do you have a supplementary question or a short statement, sir?
Just a short question. I was wondering what the plans are for Bedford buses. As hydrogen and battery power buses are available now for purchasing, or the technology needs to be brought into by 2030 to be considered to be brought in for as diesel vehicle buses and the other versions.
Then you have to replace them. That's going to cost you about another £70,000, £80,000. You need a bigger depot because you need to charge them overnight and you can't have them all crammed in the way we do with diesel buses. So it's something that is not without its problems. I said to one bus operator, if instead of spending 3 times the amount of a bus you just subsidised the existing buses so that we get more people out of their cars, so they weren't using combustion engine cars and they were on the buses, would that be a better climate change option? He said, yeah, I think it would. We are looking at it. We will continue looking at it. You mentioned hydrogen. We have also looked at that, and our eyes are open to that possibility coming down the line. We would need a depot which would be able to store the hydrogen. One council that we've looked at, the storage area is about as large as the depot itself, so you'd need to buy a new depot and all that comes in as well. So it's not quite as straightforward as we would hope, perhaps, but I hope the opportunities will be there in the future, and you can rest assured that Bedford Borough Council will not miss an opportunity if it's there and presents itself and it makes sense. But it has to be common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We have also received a notification from Mr. Ian Nicholas that he would like to put a question to Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nicholas, please.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous question and comments are very pertinent to my question. The most recent rail strategy from Bedford Borough claims that there will be travel time improvements provided by East West Rail.
Could you sit down if possible, because it's better for the microphone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good use of my time. The most recent strategy from Bedford Borough claims that there will be travel time improvements provided by East West Rail. Are you satisfied with these
Sorry
timings?
to interrupt you, Ian. Do you want to move the mic closer to yourself? Sorry.
The most recent rail strategy from Bedford Borough claims that there will be travel time improvements provided by East West Rail. Are you satisfied with these timings?
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Headley is the portfolio holder of Rail. I'll ask him to answer.
Thank you. Yes, we're happy with the timings as they're represented based on current knowledge and current information. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Nicholas, do you have supplementary question or short statement?
No, but I have a statement. Network Rail has recently commented about the problems of the connectivity of the East West Rail plans. Simply, the current plan does not work. Even a basic review illustrates this problem. For example, thinking back to when I worked with people from Nottingham, I had to look at some of the route choices they could make. Nottingham to Oxford via East West Rail, station to station, car would win by 8 minutes. But that's not a realistic journey. I then had to look at a more realistic journey that could be taken from the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham to the Old Road campus in Oxford. And again, car wins by an hour. Even locally, and I was reminded of this because of the February 2021 council meeting, where somebody mentioned about East West Rail being used to visit the Blues. I had to look at a journey I would have made when younger, from St Neots to Bedford. It would take today about 32 minutes by bus, and a few minutes just to walk to that bus stop. To get to Bedford, to St Neots rail station from where I lived in the town centre at St Neots would be 20 minutes walking, and an equal time apparently by bus, which I find quite ridiculous. I would then need to get from the railway station in Bedford to Goldington Road. Obviously, the times there just do not work. Even Grant Shapps recently on LBC has noted that this plan is just not worth it. And therefore, I worry about what was put forward in the rail strategy. We need to think about these figures in the context that this is going to be destroying homes and wrecking a community. How can the borough turn to people in Poets and say that houses will have to be demolished for the northern route? It hardly engenders a sense of trust, especially as when you published the strategy, the opportunity to clearly, emphatically state that there will not be demolition supported by you was missed.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. The final question to be submitted to this evening's meeting have been received from Ms. Maria Jo Pace-Monded. Ms. Pace-Monded, please.
Hello. I'm asking this question on behalf of Protect Poets, which is a campaign group objecting to the northern route and to the proposed demolition of homes if that route is adopted. So my question is, the executive have agreed an updated rail strategy. Has this been agreed by full council, or will it be placed on a future agenda? This is to the Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I appreciate the situation that the residents in your area are experiencing and the uncertainty that's been caused by the East West Rail Company and the government's continued delays on this situation that it's an unacceptable situation that people are facing. In terms of the strategy that you've mentioned, it was agreed by the executive through the normal democratic processes. You may have seen on that agenda there were 2 other strategies that were agreed through the same process. There's nothing unusual about that. But that executive meeting agreed 3 strategies, and one of which was the rail strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paismont, do you have a supplementary question or short statement? Thank you.
I'm really disappointed yet again that given the current feeling over your process to support the proposed EWR route, you still will not be open and transparent and meet the demands of the Nolan principles. In particular, I am concerned by the rail strategy not opposing demolitions clearly and unambiguously.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This concludes agenda item 1. Sorry, this is what I asked you. I thought you've already asked your question.
No, I've made a statement. I have a second question.
Yes, you can have.
Thank
2
you.
minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Why does the latest rail strategy agreed by the executive not state that you oppose demolitions clearly?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I'm pleased you've given the opportunity to correct perhaps some of the misunderstanding or misrepresentation that's been explained already tonight. So it's very clear in our strategy, but a couple of very clear statements in there, and I'll quote them to you, that we say the sufficiency of 4 tracks north of Bedford Borough rather than the 6 proposed by the East West Rail Company. We then go on to say the council supports retaining existing 4 tracks north of Bedford Midland Station. We've made it clear in a couple of places in there that we're very clearly committed to the 4 tracks and against the 6 tracks proposal. But further than that, we have said it in many different places at many different times that we oppose the 6 tracks north of Bedford. So to be clear, to perhaps help with that clarity, we said it in our consultation response originally to East West Rail when we had the consultation. So you'll see it referenced in there. After we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with East West Rail Company, we issued a statement at that time. Again, that's published online. You can read this as a published quote that's online, where we say 6 tracks is entirely unnecessary. We have shown how the existing 4 tracks north of Bedford Station can function for this project. Most importantly, keeping 4 tracks protects residents' homes in the Poets area. And that's a quote we did a couple of weeks ago on that. And earlier in June, when the Mayor launched the strategy that we've just been talking about, the Mayor said, again, this is printed online, so it's there for public record. He said, this is an important update to the strategy from 2019. As well as clearly setting out our priorities for rail in Bedford Borough and beyond, it also sets out our opposition to 6 tracks north of Bedford Midland and our frustration with how residents have been treated by the East West Rail Company. We have consistently campaigned to keep the existing 4-track entry and believe that our residents deserve better, and repeated delays to decisions and inconsistent communications. It is unacceptable. So that's just a couple of times when we've said very clearly what the situation is. And to avoid any further doubt, I'm happy to confirm again here tonight that we do not believe that the East West Rail Company proposal for 6 tracks is needed, and we oppose it, and, to avoid any doubt, oppose the demolitions that would be needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
I have
Sorry,
a short
you already
statement.
had your statement. Sorry, you asked your 2
okay.
questions. You have your statement. Thank you.
Okay.
Apologies. That concludes agenda item 1, and we are moving on to agenda item 2. Agenda item number 2, petition to be presented by members of the public. I understand there are no new petitions to be presented by members of the public. Therefore, we will now move on to agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the last meeting. Does the Council approve the minutes of the annual meeting held on 11th of May 2022 as a correct record and authorize me to sign them? Thank you. Agenda item number 4, disclosure of local and/or disclosable pecuniary interests. As I know members appreciate, it is important that we observe the provisions in the Code of Conduct relating to the disclosure of interests. So can I ask members to disclose the existence and nature of any local and/or disclosable pecuniary interest in tonight's business? Mr. Carl Meader.
Yeah, first of all, apologies, my microphone's not working. I'm item 9, my wife works for Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker?
Councillor Croft.
Yes, I also have item 9, Mr. Speaker. My wife works for Bedford Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5, Speaker's Communication. The report on Speaker's Communication is set out starting on the page 5, bracket 1 of the agenda. As you all know, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was no in-person meeting to formally recognise the service of Councillor Hill, who served as a Speaker of the Council from 2019-2020, and we were going to do so at annual council, but he was unable to attend that meeting. Therefore, we will do so now. I call upon Councillor McHugh to say a few words regarding Councillor Hill's time as a Speaker of the Council.
Thanks for the notice. I'm not sure anything can be said about Councillor Hill's time as Speaker which hasn't already been said. But it's a good job he's receiving his medal tonight, because otherwise you can be sure he'd be here in shorts. He's well known for that. Everyone around his ward know him by that, as well as by his great industry. And he brought a lot of his enthusiasm and his long experience of the borough to the role of Speaker. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Do any other members wish to speak? No? Okay. I call upon Councillor Hill to respond, please.
Mr. Speaker, can you hear me all? Yes. Thank you very much. As many colleagues will know, as the Speaker just... Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many colleagues will know, as you just said, for COVID lockdown and then personal health reasons, I hadn't up till now been able to be given my past Speaker's badge until this evening. I only want to say thank you to all who helped make me being Speaker, especially my wife Jo, my family, including my father-in-law Douglas, both over there in the far corner behind Councillor Ware, Alec, who was a superb Mayor's officer, the current Liberal Democrat group and our campaign team, and my large team of leaflet deliverers in my ward. I just simply finish by saying to colleagues, if you get the chance to be Speaker, do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. I will now ask... I will now ask the Chief Executive to present the Councillor Hill with his past Speaker's badge. Thank you. Thank you. With regard to this evening's Agenda 1, would like to bring to your attention that there is no business to conduct in relation to items 7, 9, 10, 18 and 19. These being debated on petitions previously submitted. Report of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority, questions of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority. Members of committees and items brought forward under pressure, producer rule FC 26. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item number 6. Agenda item number 6, petitions presented by borough councillors. I understand there are no new petitions to be presented by members. Therefore, we will move on to agenda item number 8, as there is no business relating to agenda item 7. Agenda item number 8, questions from members. Can I ask Councillor Abbots? Councillor Abbots, just speak. Then.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question for the Mayor, Mr. Speaker. Would the Mayor join me and my colleague, Councillor Solomon, in expressing our condolences to the named victim of the Redwood Grove incident last Monday? Also, our massive thanks to Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue, the police, the ambulance service, the magnificent response from our emergency response team, especially the volunteers, our council officers and all Bedford Borough staff who were called to duty and provided such amazing assistance on a dreadful day. To add, Mr. Mayor, what a great community spirit Bedford showed in the fantastic support of donations from the public and how Bedford truly pulled together in such a tragic event.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Wooten to...
Can I answer the question, Mr. Speaker, if I may?
Please do.
Thank you very much, and thank you for notice. Councillor Crofts, I'm sure the whole council wish to express our condolences to the family, friends and loved ones of Rena James. And our sympathies also go to those who have lost their homes and all their possessions in this tragic incident. I'm sure we'd all like to thank all those involved in the aftermath, the Blue Light Services, the council staff and many volunteers for all they've done. And of course our gratitude for the incredible supportive community that Bedford Borough has once again shown it has. I'm sure we'd all like to join in thanking all those people and sending our condolences to the family.
Thank you. Councillor Wooten would like to ask a question.
Thank you very much. My question is also on Redwood Grove and the terrible fire. Condolences and all the rest of it, and it's Bedford's come together. But I just wondered whether I could have. I'll take a written answer. I just wondered, could we have some facts and figures around this? How many people did the council support? How many families were there? How many children? What happened to them? That sort of thing. And also a small section about what is the long-term situation with these families. Are we now entrapped by insurance, or are we still supporting them as a council? And generally, what has the council been doing? Because I think the council's done some really amazing stuff, and I'd just like some facts and figures around it.
Thank you, Councillor Wooten. Mayor?
I'm sure that if you listen back to your words, I'm sure your condolences are more serious than your comments made there, so maybe you want to look back at your words. We're all condolences with the family. I've met a number of Councillor Crofts as the ward councillor. They are currently the adjacent blocks of flats. Some people call them tower blocks. They are 3 stories. I don't think that counts as tower blocks, but they are 3 stories. And some of the reports in the press were inaccurate. I know from very early on that it was unlikely to be a mains gas explosion because there is no mains gas in the building. We should not surmise on the outcome of that because the investigation by the police and fire and rescue continues. The building was and is unsafe, and of course they have to make the building safe before they can get them there. And obviously us and others, I'm sure, will learn from what happens in the investigation, the outcome of the investigation, and we need to make sure that we learn very quickly and we make sure the building industry learns as well. We dealt with approximately 50 on the day, but some people went direct to friends and relatives to stay. My understanding is the building owner's insurance has covered them, and it does do for most this month, but it runs out next month. But I will give you a written answer. There is a drop-in session for them, the residents, tomorrow evening, for them to go and see where they are. We continue to work with them. I know that Councillor Solomon and Councillor Crofts, as the ward councillors, have been working to make sure that there are housing plans in place for all those, because the insurance money does run out. I have said that when we know more of the circumstances, so some people, so everybody, has lost all they have there, all their possessions, and we need to look at how we can support them. They may not have all had household contents insurance, how we look at that. And I know one, for example, that was hoping to go to her partner's homeland later next month and has not got a passport. So trying to get a passport, but we'll be asking the MPs if they can help. But I'll give a fuller answer in writing, Councillor Wootton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought we got two, John. I was going to try and struggling with the microphone as I am. I did offer my condolences, and I think of our groups and condolences for the terrible events, and we have privately and other ways made that quite clear. So, but I'm just looking forward to the written answer and to the information that will come on the families and the numbers, because I think the council's done an amazing job, and it would be nice to share that information.
Thank you. Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have two questions, but I'm happy for my second question to go to the end of the queue. And my question is for the Mayor. Mr. Mayor, you will no doubt be aware of the Gypsy traveller encampment of 30 caravans in the borough sited on the protected urban gap and green space, which is a former golf course in Great Denham. It was on there for 6 days, and then on borough land, the country park, for 4 days, still in Great Denham. So residents in Great Denham were subjected to antisocial behaviours, exposed to danger on public footpaths, running through and between the encampments, and acts of intimidation, theft and vandalism. Evidence for all these were provided to the police. And I know these are issues which are the responsibility of the police, and I have taken the lack of meaningful response up with both the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner. The borough's Gypsy and Traveller Liaison officers were exemplary in working with me and the Parish Council to support the community's concerns, even though I understand their role to be more one of welfare. However, responsibility for planning, for the provision of sufficient Gypsy and Traveller sites in England lies with local authorities, who are best placed to assess the needs of their communities. It is widely acknowledged, though, that there is a national shortage of suitable and permanent and transit traveller sites. Notwithstanding that, this is a difficult circle to square what our Bedford Borough Council plans to resolve. The current situation is that once action is taken to remove the unauthorised encampment, it moves on to somewhere else, either in the borough, which it did in this case, or to somewhere else in the county. The Chief Constable points out that the police could use their power much more quickly if they had somewhere to move these unauthorised encampments to. He said he has been discussing this with the 3 local unitary authorities for the last 5 years, but as yet no sites exist. Are there any plans, discussions to provide Bedford Borough with a transit site, and if not, why not?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the note of the question, Councillor Weir. I have asked the portfolio holder to actually answer the question, because it is her portfolio. She will be answering. But can I just clarify something? I have not had discussions with the Chief Constable about a transit site in the 5 years.
You said with the authorities.
As I said, I have not had discussions, but if I give Councillor Atkins, will actually answer the question.
Councillor Atkins, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Because I've got trouble hearing what's going on because of this machine. So I'm having really struggling. Thank you very much for raising the issue. I understand completely the concerns and the distress that residents of Great Denham experienced, and the same for yourself and the Parish Council. But what the council does is tries to make a balanced decision, and we have a really difficult task balancing the rights of the residents and the rights of the travellers. So I can only say that I really sympathise with you, because it was a very large encampment at that particular time. But the thing is that not all encampments cause that disruption. Sometimes we have travellers passing through, and those particular sites, aren't causing a problem. But in this case, I understand that it did. So what we've done is the liaison officers have a very difficult job, and I'm really pleased that you have expressed your gratitude and also talked about the fact that they were exemplary, because they've got a very difficult job. But what happens is that when an encampment arrives, usually that day, or at the latest the next day, they will go out to assess that particular unauthorised encampment. And it's all right, I'm looking at what you said before. So the encampment is assessed individually. Each one, they have a visit from the liaison officers, and they assess what is needed. They only make a request to the police to use their statutory powers when an encampment is causing serious disruption, and that they are preventing the use of local facilities, that they're causing antisocial behaviour, that they're causing crime, and that it would be unacceptable to wait the whole week, which is normally the amount of time that it takes, for the normal legal process to go through to remove them from the site. So in that particular case, yes, it was really causing lots of disruption and lots of problems locally. But regarding the statement by the police about a transit site, that is really difficult, because the council does complete a very detailed gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment, and they do that every 5 years, and the last one was done this last November. And the conclusion from that is that the historic low numbers of unauthorised encampments, I know in this case you won't think that it was a low number, but I'm talking of across the years, that it's not recommended to have a formal public transit site in Bedford, and that the situation relating to the levels of unauthorised encampments will continue to be monitored. And that assessment is available on the council's website. There is nothing in the legislation or the government statutory guidance that was issued or it was updated in June this year, that requires a transit site to be available before the police can use their powers, and those powers are under Section 61 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act. So they don't have to, they can make those powers, they can use those powers without a transit site. The recent encampment at Great Denham was 35 caravans, enormous, and I don't think we've ever had so many in the borough. However, a transit site wouldn't have solved that, because a transit site wouldn't be big enough. So in that particular case, it just wouldn't have worked. And also, it would clearly be an unjustified use of public resources to maintain a transit site of that size for the odd occasion when that number arrive in the borough. So it wouldn't have had any bearing on the police's actions for that particular time. The number of families at the Great Denham encampment were actually known to have permanent sites themselves, permanent pitches, and therefore there was nothing to prevent the police saying to them, or exercising their alternative powers under Section 62A of the Act, to order people to return to their lawful site. So, and that would apply to a number of people within that particular encampment. And the government has also very recently significantly strengthened the police powers to deal with unauthorised encampments, and where those strengthened powers are for when there's likely to be significant damage or disruption or distress. And so for the first time, these powers include preventing the unauthorised encampment beforehand and to seize vehicles and other goods if necessary. However, whilst it is right that these new powers should be used sparingly, the Council will expect the police to use these powers in appropriate circumstances to protect residents from unlawful behaviour. So as I said to start with, I really, really do sympathise with what was happening at Great Denham. It was because a funeral, all these families kind of came together for the particular funeral, and then they dispersed in various ways. So I hope that you will understand that a transit site isn't the answer.
Thank you, Councillor Atkin. Councillor Weir, you have a second question, I believe.
I have a statement, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Atkins. I lived every minute of those 10 days in talking to both the liaison officers, the police, and other officers within the council. And yes, I agree, it was a rather unusual and large gathering. However, the stated purpose of the Borough Executive is to improve the quality of life for residents in Bedford Borough. Residents of Great Denham had the quality of their life impacted for 10 days. And even now, as we sit here, there is still rotting and putrefying rubbish close to public footpaths on the urban gap. Whilst I applaud the speed which the environment team cleaned up the country park, I strongly condemn both the landowner and their agents for allowing this rubbish to remain a public health hazard for nearly 4 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first start with regard to the Redwood Grove tragedy, endorsing the Mayor's comments and offering from the Conservative group our condolences to the bereaved, our sympathy for those affected, and also our thanks for the emergency and support workers who dealt with the aftermath. My question relates to the Stuart B incinerator, and residents living in the vicinity of the incinerator, bit of a tongue twister, have expressed concern recently about emissions. And obviously this is not something that just affects people living immediately around Stuart, but also the wider area, Wootton, Wixhams, Wilstead, Houghton Conquest. Can the Mayor say what measures are in place? What is this Borough Council doing to monitor emissions from the incinerator to ensure that they are within acceptable limits?
Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you. The monitoring, I believe, is Environment Agency, but I will check with Councillor Benham, who you may wish to talk to, because though the entrance is in Bedford Borough, the incinerator comes under the Central Bedfordshire Council, and therefore, if it is not the Environment Agency, it will be Central Bedfordshire Council. But if you, I will communicate with Councillor Benham. I will check with staff what the monitoring is. But I believe it's the Environment Agency, but I'll confirm that in writing. I'm having nods from some of my colleagues, but it's the Environment Agency to do that. I will, as I say, contact Councillor Benham. It'd be interesting to know what they have seen or smelt that makes them believe that is the case. And if you could share that with me, I will share the answers and pursue it on behalf of our residents.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a short statement, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the answer. I do think it is important now that the borough is sending waste to be burnt at the incinerator, that after all the local opposition, that whilst it may be the Environment Agency that is the appropriate body to do the monitoring, that we need to be sure that Bedford borough residents are safe and are not being subject to unnecessary high levels of emissions from that incinerator. Whilst I accept your point that the incinerator itself might be in central Bedfordshire Council, it's clearly something that would affect, as I said, not just residents of Stewartby, but villages around. I know Wixham's residents have expressed concern about it too. So whilst it might be a statutory obligation of the Environment Agency, I would like to think that this borough is also monitoring emissions from Stewartby and has a plan in place to address it should they be found in breach of acceptable levels. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, may I indulge you? Councillor Coombs has to come back on that if you're prepared to, otherwise I'll give a written answer.
Yes, I'm happy to have a written answer. Could I ask, as per our group leaders meeting recently, if we have written answers, could they be shared with the entire council, not just the questioner, and could they also be recorded in the minutes of the subsequent meeting as well, again, so that everybody may see, rather than it just be a one-to-one communication?
And as I said at the time, I believe that is the correct procedure that should be followed and will be followed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Mayor. There is great concern for the closing of the Cambridge branch of Look East. The people of Bedford Borough rely on Look East, brackets West, to get their local news, to feel involved, and to know what is happening in their local area. They gave very good coverage to the incinerator battle led by the Liberal Democrats. Residents have told me that they fear the valued way Look East communicates with local communities is going to be lost, and there will be increased competition for airtime if both branches of Look East merge. Local issues will receive less coverage, with editorial decisions made from Norwich, 100 miles away from our borough. The service was originally split for a good reason, as we share many geographical, cultural and social similarities with our neighbouring region, and less so with those further east. With this in mind, I would like to ask the Mayor what steps have been taken by the Council to prevent this source of local news being lost.
Mr. Mayor, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Hill. First, I'd like to thank the many residents who have raised the issue. I also share the concern that this important source of reputable local news is being closed and merged with another that's almost 100 miles away. I know BBC Look East West isn't perfect. I am a believer in the BBC and the work it does to hold politicians to account and providing credible, accessible, localised news. And I do think that talking to some of the recent journalists that have been around with the Redwood Grove, that they are concerned about the news not being covered when the editorial decisions will be taken across in Norwich. We've also seen how essential localised is during the pandemic. With credible local news sources, it would have been so much more difficult to provide vital public safety information to a large number of people when we were in a different tier to Norwich, to Suffolk, to Essex. In terms of the steps we have already taken, I've signed a letter to the BBC voicing our concerns and calling on the closure to be stopped, and we will continue to campaign for our residents so that we can continue to receive this dedicated local service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No. Councillor Gallagher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for Councillor McMurdo. Over the last month, there's been an article in the Daily Telegraph regarding fusion, and a lot of councils are expressing their concerns on the way they're being treated by fusion, the staff and the quality of their properties. Over the last few weeks, myself have attended different things, and residents of my ward have actually expressed their concerns about the state of Oasis. They have said although the roof and the windows have been replaced inside and outside of Oasis, there is sand at the bottom of the pool, and nobody seems to be interested in clearing that up. There have also been reports of dirty nappies laying in the changing rooms. They don't appear to have cleaners in Oasis. What they actually do is have team members, youngsters, cleaning when they're finished lifeguarding and washing the pool. These cleaners that are doing the work obviously aren't doing the job properly, and I just wondered whether Councillor McMurdo could look into this for me and tell me what he is doing regarding keeping an eye on fusion.
Thank you. Mr. McGregor, Councillor.
Thank you very much for the question. I am well aware of, I wasn't particularly aware of the Telegraph, but well aware of Fusion's ability to hit the national press. I mean, this what you're describing about the way that Fusion and the treatment they're treating people, and I'm not sure whether that's clients or other stakeholders, but in any event, it's quite well understood by many, not only within this contract. I have tried to reassure you in past times, both personally and the wider audience, of the steps that we're taking. The contract was signed in 2014, and it was a 10-year contract, so you can read into that as to where we are in terms of the length remaining on the contract. But you again bring to this council an issue, and I quote, that youngsters are being asked to clean. They're not cleaners, they don't have a cleaning contract, you tell me, and there are youngsters who, I glean from what you've described, are poolside attendants, that wasn't your words, etc. These are people that live in our community, and I would urge you to talk to me outside council so that I can address these issues head on with Fusion at the highest level. Having nappies, as you've described, is wholly unacceptable in any of our premises, in the way that you've described it. So to answer your question, I could have probably answered it more quickly, but I think it warranted the response I've just described, and ask you again to talk to me, send me an email, and I will look into it and give you a detailed response. But you asked me, will I look into it? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret.
Thank you. I just wanted to sum up, if I may. Would you agree that the weather at the moment is really, really warm, and it would have been ideal to have the outside swimming pool open? It's something that I know when I was portfolio, I was really, trying to push for the outside pool to be open, and here we are so many years later, and it's still not open, and it's still dirty.
So that was a question, so I will come back, Mr. Speaker. Would I agree? Yes, I would agree. But you've already indicated that when you were portfolio holder, it's something that you clearly struggled with getting it open. I've gone through a 2-year plus period that is, in a generation, something that none of us have experienced. The leisure sector, the leisure industry suffered badly, and to have the facilities being opened and run after a very, very difficult time, I think not to have the shark gate open and the outside bit not open is a small price to pay, given the difficult times that we've had since 23rd of March 2020. But be rest assured, I do agree, and it's something that my staff colleagues are working on aggressively to get that shark gate opened, that outside area in a fit condition, clean and tidy. And I will give you a written update when I get the facts from the staff team. Thank you.
Thank you. That is good news to hear, especially as the shark gate cost a lot of money.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Thank you, Councillor Magdalen. Okay, Councillor Weir again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Second question is to the Mayor. I thought my first question was, but obviously not. Mr Mayor, please bear with me. I just read a small section of the minutes from the 16th of March, full council, before I ask my question. Councillor Foster advised that she was asking a question on behalf of Councillor Weir, as he was unable to do so himself, as he had tested positive for COVID. He had asked that responses to members be provided by officers within 48 hours, recognising the important role members played as a conduit between the council and their local communities. As a matter of urgency, he requested information on whether a current response time to members' queries existed, and if not, that a 48-hour response be adopted. Acknowledging that in some cases this may need to be a holding response. Mr Mayor, you commented that this was an operational matter with the remit of the head of paid service, and that you would consult with the Chief Executive prior to providing a written response. So my question is, do you, Mr Mayor, think that a question asked as a matter of urgency should take you 113 days, nearly 4 months, to respond to? The written response from your office was worthy of Sir Humphrey Appleby at his best. If a written answer is to be provided, as Councillor Coombs said, it should follow within days and should be placed in the minutes so that all elected members can see the answer. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, please.
As I said previously, it's an operation issue. I have responded. I will copy that response to everybody if you haven't already, and I'll ask the Chief Executive to respond because, as I said, it's an operation issue. For me to tell the head of paid service how her officers should work is not my place. I think that we should have a process that is clear, but I also think members of the public should have as good a service as we get, because usually it's been escalated because that is not good, so we shouldn't be the first port to call. But I would have wanted to respond quicker, probably haven't, and I will work with the Chief Executive and senior officers to make sure there is a robust system in place to respond to members' queries.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Moon, please. Oh, sorry, do you want to make a statement or ask a question?
A statement, please.
Thank you.
Just so that everybody is clear, in case they don't get to see the response, to quote the Mayor's office, officers have been working on some proposals for a new member's front door, where all members' inquiries will be sent and acknowledged, triaged and sent to the relevant teams to work up a response. Mayor Dave has approved these proposals, and the next stage will be a requirements gathering workshop to be conducted with members to ensure that proposals and process design is refined such that it fully satisfies their requirements. End quote. All I wanted was a 48-hour response.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Councillor Moon, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The question is to the Mayor. Like most of us, or if not all of us, I received this week a letter from the Stop the Arc group, a group I've never previously heard of. The Arc is apparently moving on despite the government having taken the wind out of its sails. And indeed, it's looking a bit like the Black Knight, and with at least 2.5 limbs gone, with more to go. My concern is that meetings are clearly going on, and yet we hear nothing, and the minutes of the meetings are not made public, and if released by FOI requests, apparently are heavily redacted. At a previous council meeting, you confirmed that you would answer questions, you would be reporting back on this project. Can you confirm, if it's too short notice to bring us up to date tonight, that you'll produce a written report for the next council?
Mr Mayor, please.
Thank you. Just for those who can't hear, it's been very difficult to hear that, Councillor Moon. I'm struggling, but it is about the ARC and reporting back. I think we all received that. I think everybody across the ARC received the letter. As you are saying, the government has removed a team of about 30 civil servants from the ARC group, and it wasn't mentioned in the last budget. The new Secretary of State for Deluxe was a big fan of the ARC, so we wait to see if they make any statements or whether he stays there beyond the 5th of September. While civil servants, and not ministers, civil servants are saying that the government wants to work with areas bigger than single local authorities. So whether that be Midland Engine, Transport for the North, London councils, the Greater Western authorities, and they are talking about what's happening. The ARC is, and we do pay some money to it, is there are ongoing discussions about what should happen. They are repetitive discussions. The one that I will come back to, and when anything moves of any note, I will come back to you, is the discussions that myself and the leaders of the other 6 unity authorities, the 6 unity authorities in total, the Bedfordshire, Milton Keynes and Northampton unity authorities are having. So you'll know there's been a deal done, in Oxfordshire deal. There's a combined authority in Cambridgeshire, and Buckinghamshire is trying for a levelling up level 2 bid. The discussions that I'm having with the other leaders, so that's the 2 Northamptons, West and North, Central Beds, Luton and Milton Keynes, is about us putting together a bid for that. We as leaders have asked the chief executives to put together what that bid might include. So level 2s is basically what we're looking at is skills particularly, and to devolve some of the skills base down. As soon as we have that document to look at and have discussed it and see whether there's any broad agreement, before we sign up to it, that will come to this council to agree. The last meeting was at the LGA conference where 5 of the 6 of us were there, and I believe the authority that didn't have the leader there had a chief exec, and I know the chief execs had meetings as well. This is about trying to see, can we put a bid in to get some levelling up? And I would say we do need levelling up. It's all very well saying the North doesn't have as much areas, and there is some areas that need levelling up. But when you look at the 1 GP for 2,700 people in Bedford Borough, and the 1 GP for 1,800 people in Liverpool, we need levelling up and we need more GPs. So we'll put a bid in to make sure we're levelled up on GPs, on primary care health service. You'll have seen that we actually grew more than any other authority in the last 10 years, and yet our GP practice, our GP space hasn't grown. The amount of money we have for bus services hasn't grown. There's a whole lot of things that we need to actually have our fair share of as we take the government's 1,355 houses a year. And when that proposal comes forward from the 6 authorities, I will bring it to this council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I request everybody to speak closer to the mic, please? Due to the fan over there, it's such a noisy, so people can't hear. Councillor Moon, please.
Point taken, Mr. Speaker. Although that fan is both noisy and not entirely doing its job, I have to say. It's a bit warm in here. The Mayor's response confirms my fears that there are things not being reported which I feel could usefully be reported, if only to put some wind back in the sails, if that needs to be done. These are big issues that have a bearing on us, have a bearing on our housing targets, have a bearing on our planning issues and overall strategy. And to have them not reported or reported periodically seems to be a wasted opportunity to get people involved. The minutes, as excerpted within the letter that we had, do indicate that they've recognised the lack of public engagement, and I think the way to do that is to make this more public and to engage people with the issues so they can actually understand what is going on. As things stand, it seems merely to be a threat. It may be less of a threat if it's made more public, and that the start could be made here by having matters brought to this council more frequently, rather than simply on the eve of a major decision.
Thank you, Councillor Moon. Mr. Mayor, do you want to respond, or is that a statement?
I thought it was a statement. Yes.
Doesn't need to respond.
Okay, thank you. We move on to Councillor Towell, please.
Thank you. This is Councillor Royden. The road from Old Tunnel Site in Sharnbrook Roundabout is at last being done, so it's a great improvement. The question is Milton Road Thurley and Mill Road Thurley, both Category C roads, are used as the Northern Bedford bypass and take a lot of traffic, cars and heavy HGVs. But under the sheer weight of traffic, they are both collapsing. Potholes are sometimes filled with a T on top, but some holes, due to subsidence, may have a white line painted around them, which then wears away. These surfaces have destabilised palleted loads and with sudden lurches to one side, and as the vehicle drops in up to a 9-inch hole, then out again. These are not potholes but subsidence. Vehicles drive down the middle of the road to avoid these hazards, causing even more unforeseen dangers. And the question really is, where in the road improvement plan is the road condition improvement going to be addressed?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Town. Thank you for giving me the heads up on this a couple of days ago. I would have got back to you a bit more quickly, because I do always try to respond within 24 hours, let alone 48. And if you haven't had a response in that time, just come and knock on my door or give me a ring, like you can do with the Mayor. Don't wait 3 months and then come along to Council and say, where's the answer? It just seems bonkers. To read that, because the Mayor's on a mobile phone like I am, and you can just phone us up. I've never had a more accessible Mayor or a more accessible Deputy Mayor. You can just give me a ring. Please do that. But you did give me a question, and I've just had the answer 50 minutes before this meeting, and I've given you a written response. But let me say this. First of all, on the potholes, we filled in about 3,500 of those last year. 6,000 square metres of potholes. The road in question that you're talking about, you're absolutely right, does need sorting out. And I asked officers for the timescales. And Milton Road, Thurley, well, it's one of the concrete roads, as you will be fully aware. And we're due to start work there in August, once the current phase on Thurley Road, Milton Ends, is completed. And Thurley Parish Council have been in touch several times to discuss the condition of Mill Road, Thurley. It's not on the programme for this year, but I understand it's scoring high on the matrix for next financial year. So potentially there will be a scheme then. Now for next year, we've earmarked something like £9.457 million on the budget for our highways. Interestingly, I think the government gives us about 2.027 million. So that's a huge investment by this council to try and get ahead of these things. And I know we've got 500 million specifically for concrete roads. So I hope that we will be able to show progress. It is needed, as you've rightly pointed out, and I hope that we see that improvement. I believe that there was insufficient budget for us to complete Mill Road in the same visit as our works on Milton Road and Thurley Road, so it's going to be a scheme in its own right. I would point out to all councillors that I don't decide what roads get done. I have no part in that. The officers do a very careful matrix. It's done to identify the worst roads first, the ones that need to be done, to keep people safe, protect our residents. These aren't political decisions, but you're quite right to raise it, and we'll see what we can do going forward and keep you informed. And thank you for your question.
Sorry,
Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Could you just confirm how much for concrete roads?
500 million. Sorry, 500,000.
I was going to say 500 million.
Yeah, that would be an awful lot.
So I did think that was quite a lot of money.
It's difficult when you deal in all these zeros. No, sorry, it's 9.457 for the million for the whole programme. And as I say, we pump in a massive, over 7 million of that ourselves as a council. The government only gives just over 2.
Thank you.
500 is 1,000.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Specifically, but I wish I did have 500 million. I'd say I could do something with that.
Councillor Talbot, do you have a question or statement?
No, not really, except Milton Road, only half of it is concrete underneath, the rest is tarmac, and that is subsiding badly.
Thank you. So, Councillor Wooten.
There we go. As the Mayor is probably well aware, the Environment Agency are working at Castle Mill, constructing and altering the weir. I wonder whether he would use his good office to take an interest in that scheme and to get assurances from the Environment Agency that it will not alter the water level or the flooding event problems that occur back towards Bedford.
Mr. Mayor, please.
I admit the local landowner, the Rogers, and showed me around that site some time ago and had discussions with them. I hope it would alter it and make things better, because that's the job of the Environment Agency. I can ask them questions, but we should be making things better as we do work on the river courses and not making stuff worse. That's the job, but I can ask them. But you can, of course, as a councillor, write to them yourself and ask them the same question. I'm sure you'll get as rapid a response as I do. or Councillor McMurdo sits on the flood and coastal erosion panel, something similar. He'll sure correct me, and I'm sure I can raise it with him to raise that. But I don't believe, but I can check that, they would ever get permission to do something that made stuff worse. But I will follow that up, Councillor Wootton. You can, of course, yourself write them, if you wish, as a lecture member.
Councillor Wootton.
Following up from that, it is worrying to residents because of the big effects this will have on residents in Goldington if this is not got right. And because the water backs up and it will come back towards the residents in Goldington, and it is a great worry. The other great worry is that the work they're doing does seem that it is ruling out any possibility of hydroelectric being there, seeing as this is one of the deepest locks in Europe, and certainly in the top 5 or 6, it is the ideal place for hydroelectric, and it does seem rather a shame that they're doing a lot of work down there and they're not considering the possibility of any hydroelectric works. But I'll let the Mayor see what he can find out.
I would, let's be clear and not scaremonger among the residents of Wootton, the residents of Goldington. The works that the Environment Agency here on the watercourse are to make things better. I'd also love to have his details about how it's one of the 5th largest locks in Europe, deepest locks in Europe, having been on the Danube and Rhine. I would be really surprised. I look forward to receiving the data to show it is and to be proved wrong.
Thank you.
Small statement. The data came from Mr McMurdo's good offices, the Drainage Board, who said it was one of the deepest locks in Europe because of the height fall in the level of the water. That came from the Drainage Board, not me. It wasn't the biggest, because I'm sure there are a lot bigger locks that take ships and stuff up and down the Danube. It was the height level. And because of the height level, it is probably the most ideal place for hydroelectric up and down the Ouse. But I'll let the Mayor find out what he can and come back to us.
Thank you, Councillor Wootton. Councillor McMurdo, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as Councillor Wootton has actually named me and said my good offices, I assume this is the board that I'm chairman of, that you're a board member of. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, I'll follow it up with my good offices that you're a board member of to see what that arrives from. Because I actually wrote down deepest lock in Europe because that did surprise me. But can I just point out that the Environment Agency wouldn't enter into a hydropowered system in any of their protection because they are very, very clear that they are there to protect people and property. And I'm quietly confident, and I'll get a written statement both for yourself and the Mayor and the Council about the protection and the improvements being made that will not worsen the situation. And I wouldn't want any residents of our borough to hear this discussion thinking that we were worsening the position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMurdo. Do we have anybody else for a question? No? Thank you. That concludes agenda item 8, and we will move on to agenda item 11, as there is no business to conduct in relation to agenda item 9, 10. Agenda item number 11, reports of the Mayor and executive members. I now invite the Mayor to introduce his report on the use of the special urgency procedure starting on page 11, bracket 1 of the agenda. Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Usually decisions to be made by the executives are published in the notice of forthcoming decisions to ensure that there is sufficient notice given to the public and members of the Council who may wish to comment. However, there are circumstances in which decisions need to be made urgently. Under those circumstances, the Council Constitution provides 2 procedures that can be used. The general exception, which requires the proper office to inform the Chair and all other members of the relevant Open Scrutiny Committee of the matter about which the decision is to be made, and that at least 5 days clear have elapsed prior to the decision being taken, and the special urgency for which 5 days clear notice cannot be given. The procedure was used on 3 times earlier this calendar year. although that is 3 times more than I would like and would have wished. But the circumstances of each are outlined in the report, and I am happy to answer questions on individual decisions or the report as a whole. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is the motion seconded? Second. Thank you. Are there any questions? Any comments? Mr. Mayor, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing further to add, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. I now invite the Finance Portfolio Holder to present the report on the General Fund Budget Autumn 2021-2022 and Capital Budget Autumn 2021-2022. Starting on the page 11.2, bracket 1 of the agenda. Councillor Headley, please.
Thank you. Some members will know I did a presentation on this report at Budget Scrutiny, so I'd encourage anyone who's interested in looking at this further explanation to have a look at that recording online as well. Turning to the report, overall we saw a 0.7% underspend on last year's budget. However, that covers some changes in both directions and responding to the ongoing impact from the pandemic, both on service demand and on income. I want to thank portfolio holders and officers right across the Council for all their work last year in managing these budgets in unprecedented times. The proposal in this report is to release the specific COVID-19 portion of the general fund balance, as we believe that it's appropriate now to manage those risks within the normal risk-based process for assessing the general fund balance. Together with the underspend, this creates the opportunity to further invest in priority work to deliver for local residents on a number of fronts, and you'll see those listed in the recommendations before you in the report. I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded. To the right.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Coon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Councillor Headley, for the report. I just have a question. If I can refer you to the table on page 11.2, bracket 5, where it shows a just over 2 million underspend on adult services. I'm conscious we have an adult services precept, which we increase and charge people additional council tax for adult services. But then the kind of 2 million underspend. I echo your comment about the facts here at the pub. I think the general will be acceptable out there. Just wondering about the ethics, but people it seems to me, in conversations I've had with residents in Wixons and Wilson recently, an increasing number of people who are not digitally engaged, either because they are elderly and can't use digital services, or some people in digital poverty and just don't have access to these things. And it does seem whenever we ask questions, we're told, oh, put it through the reporting tool, or, you know, put it on, email somebody. And whilst I accept that that's the general direction of travel, it's not always possible for a significant number of people. And even working through a lifetime, we all start to lose faculties at some point. Things we could do at 25, we can't always do when we're 55. So I would just make a plea that whilst I accept and support the idea that we should go through efficiency through technology, we must not forget those people for whom that is not an option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Councillor Harley?
Thank you. I mean, absolutely agree. That's always been our approach. That's always been our philosophy. There will always be those opportunities for people who can't use the digital channels. And digital channels are there and very popular, and many people will find them advantageous, 24/7 access and all the rest of it, and they are very helpful for many people. But we will always recognise there are people where that is not the right way and not an appropriate way for them to engage, and we'll always make sure there's ways to those people are helped and assisted, through the call centre and through personal appointments if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any more questions? Comments? Councillor Haldy, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. The motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes item 12, and we will now move on to agenda item 13. Agenda item number 13, report of the General Purpose Committee. Whilst some members will be aware that the General Purpose Committee has received a report on this matter, there has been further progress since that time. Therefore, the Chief Executive has provided an update report concerning amendments to the Council senior management structures, especially regarding the post of the monitoring officer, which starts on page 13, bracket 1 of the agenda. There have been no comments received in relation to the consultation referred to in the report. I am moving this recommendation set out in the report from the Chair. Is the motion seconded? Okay. Are there any questions on this report? Are there any comments? Sorry.
Are we on report 13, general purposes?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I do have a question to the Chair of GP, if I may.
Yes, sure.
Sorry. So the reason for my not realising is I thought Councillor McHugh would have been moving this as Chair of GP. It's just a point about the absence of a monitoring officer, and I know we've had that post has been filled on a temporary basis a number of times. I also noticed that we're about to go into a review of the Borough Constitution, and clearly that is something where a monitoring officer is an integral and essential part of it. And I just wonder whether Councillor McHugh would like to comment on how we plan to go about this in terms of the review of the Constitution, but also ensuring that there is somebody there who is qualified and can engage with it as necessary.
Councillor McHugh, please.
Thanks. Yes, the reason I'm not moving it is because it's not the report. This is not the same report that went to GP. So, but GP did agree to bring forward the recruitment, the search for a permanent monitoring officer. So, although we've not had permanent monitoring officers, we've had 2 interims, and when the interim's not here, somebody's always acting up. Nonetheless, it means we're missing that capacity, that 1 full-time equivalent. And you're quite right, the monitoring officer not only, as it references in the report, helps with elections, but does a whole lot of other stuff, a lot of important stuff. And I did, in terms of the review of the Constitution, it was initially proposed that the review of the Constitution by a previous monitoring officer that the review of the Constitution should be exhaustive, go through everything, which to the view of the committee, all of the committee agreed, this wasn't necessary because, in fact, just before the previous election, there had been a wholesale review. So now we have a review that is more focused, and I still felt that the timescale proposed was challenging, and I said so. You know, it's on the video, and it looks even more challenging without a permanent monitoring officer. So I suspect what needs to be done is, so basically there are some essential tidyings up that you could call drafting. Some reflect changes in the law, I think. So, as I say, there's some drafting that can just be done. And I think the rest is, then there are desirables. There are things that are sort of very far down the road, clearly we don't have time to do, that are wholesale rethinks. That's not the time for that at all. So then there are tidyings up, such as the conduct of meetings, putting things in the ideal place. It may be that has to just be chopped and we just do the essentials. So have a much shorter shopping list. And yeah, that was exactly my first thought when I heard that we were going to lose an interim, that that constitutional review looks a lot more challenging. So we'll just have to focus on the essentials.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Are there any further questions? Any comments? No? I have nothing further to add this. Summing up, the motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes the item 13, and we move on to item 14. Agenda item number 14, report of the Audit Committee. I now invite Councillor Masood to present the report of the Audit Committee as the chair of the committee. The report on the local code of corporate governance starts on page 14, bracket 1 of the agenda. Councillor Masood, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the Code of Corporate Governance was agreed by the Audit Committee on the 15th of March 2022 for the approval by the full Council. The report sets out the Council's governance agreements in order to maintain reinforce the Council adherence to strong corporate governance. The full code is detailed in Appendix A. The adoption of a local code of corporate governance is in keeping with the Council's commitment to developing and maintaining robust and transparent governance arrangements. This supports the delivery of its corporate plan and is in keeping with the recommended practice.
Thank you, Councillor Masood. Is this seconded? Yes, seconded. Okay. Are there any questions on the report? Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Masood, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing to add.
Motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. Motion is carried. That concludes item 14, and we move on to agenda item 15. Agenda item number 15, report of the Standards Committee. I now invite Councillor Masood to present the report on the Standards Committee as the chair of the committee. The annual Standards Committee report starts on page 15, bracket 1 on the agenda. Councillor Masood, please.
Thank you, Speaker. This is the annual report of the Standards Committee, providing a summary of the work of the committee in 2021-2022. Nothing to add.
Thank you, Councillor Masood. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the report? Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Masood, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. The motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 15, and we will move on to agenda item 16. Agenda item number 16, Bedfordshire Police and Crime Panels Report, 2021-2022. The activity report providing summary information of Bedfordshire Police and Crime Panels work during the 2022 and 2022. Municipal year is set out starting on page 16, bracket 1 on the agenda. Can I invite Councillor Weir to move the receipt of the report on behalf of the panel, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You've introduced the report. Thank you very much. As you say, it is the annual activity report of the Police and Crime Panel, and it is before you, providing a summary of the work. Just as a reminder to people who perhaps don't read or get involved in the reports that come out from the Police and Crime Panel, it is made up from the 3 unitary authorities, and there are elected members and independent public members on the panel, and the report does include information on what the panel's work involves, etc. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Is the motion seconded? Thank you. Are there any questions on the report? Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Weir, would you like to sum up, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 16, and we move on to agenda item 17. Agenda item number 17, report of the Licensing Act 2203, Licensing Committee. I now invite Councillor Simpson to present the report of the Licensing Act 2003 Licensing Committee as the chair of the committee on the communicative impact policy. The report starts on page 17, bracket 1 on the agenda. Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Cumulative Impact Assessment Policy was presented to the Licensing Committee on the 16th of June 2022 to determine the outcome of public consultation, as the relevance of the policy needs to be revised every 3 years. I move the recommendation set out in the report that the committee recommends retaining the existing 3 cumulative impact zones in the town centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions on the report? Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Simpson, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 17, and we will now move on to agenda item 20, as there is no business to conduct in relation to agenda item 18 and 19. Agenda item number 20, the report of the Chief Officer for Legal and Democratic Services and Monitoring Officer, interim. Outcome of petitions 2021-2022. The report of the Chief Officer for Legal and Democratic Services and Monitoring Officer, interim. On the outcome of petition 2021-2022 is set out starting on the page 20, bracket 1 on the agenda. I will move the report and the recommendation therein from the chair. Is the motion seconded? Seconded. Are there any questions on the report? No. Are there any comments on the report? The motion is before the Council. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 20, and we will now move on to the last item on the agenda, agenda item 21. Agenda item number 21, notice of motion submitted by Councillor Valentine. I call upon Councillor Valentine to introduce the motion of which notice was duly given.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to introduce the motion by saying a few words about how the cost of living crisis is affecting services for children and families. Threats to children's well-being and safety mainly stem from domestic violence, neglect and drug and alcohol misuse, and poverty is a factor which exacerbates the pressure on families. We currently have a record number of contacts to children's services and a very high number of children subject to child protection plans. That's to say, when a child is judged to be at risk of significant harm that affects their health, welfare and development. There's evidence from social workers that some families are so preoccupied with making ends meet that when children are having problems, their parents can't even find the time to make appointments to meet up and resolve the issues. It's clear that the number of children eligible for free school meals is increasing. The numbers are 10% up from last July. The numbers of Bedford Food Bank food parcels given out has increased by more than 75% since last year. We're coming up to the summer holidays, and this is actually a difficult time for many children. The vouchers provided by this council are a welcome lifeline to many families. And families, as ever, will be worrying about the cost of uniform for next term. Although the government issued statutory guidance in November, the purpose of which was to ensure that the cost of school uniforms is reasonable, that guidance is not being followed universally, and I've asked for a reminder to go out to borough schools. The Children's Commissioner has found evidence that children are increasingly worried about the soaring price of basic essentials and the impact on their lives, and advised MPs on the Commons Education Committee that urgent steps are required to tackle poverty ahead of a difficult autumn for families. Figures from the Child Poverty Action Group show there were 3.9 million children living in poverty in the UK last year, more than a quarter of all children. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has found that half of all children in lone parent families are in relative poverty. This increase reflects reductions in the real value of state benefits in the years from 2011 to 2019. Among the cuts in support that have most affected single parents are the benefit cap, the 4-year freeze in benefits between 2016 and 2020, the 2-child limit, and a lowering of the age of the youngest child when single parents must start looking for work. It's worth remembering that the cost of living crisis is also affecting staff who work for this council. That's to say, some of the staff who are helping vulnerable children and adults are themselves sinking into poverty. And the crisis affects people of all ages. Although the government has pledged to restore the pension triple lock, those who are reliant on the state pension will see real cuts to their standard of living this year. I recently visited a Bedford charity, which is frequently having to find small emergency payments for pensioners who can't afford to feed their prepayment meters. I heard a heart-rending story about a man who was on the verge of suicide before they intervened. We've all received so many political lectures from the caretaker Prime Minister and the Governor of the Bank of England about the 1970s and stopping a so-called wage price spiral. But the fact that in the 70s wages did in part keep pace with prices meant that people didn't actually get poorer. What's different now is that workers' bargaining power is much weaker, and so prices are going up without much movement in wages, hence the current crisis. The would-be successors to the caretaker Prime Minister are mostly competing with each other about cutting taxes, but I haven't heard much from any of them yet about the cost of living. Considering all the pressures, we can feel proud of what we've achieved locally. This council is already working to alleviate poverty wherever it's present in Bedford Borough, as much as it possibly can within its powers. But far more action is needed, hence the motion that's before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldstein. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded. Reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Are there any comments on the motion? Sorry, Councillor. Andrew.
Thank you. Parents cutting back on the food shopping and worrying how to feed the family. Residents who can no longer afford transport to get to work. People dreading winter, not knowing how they will pay for the heating. We are facing a cost of living crisis with a fall in living standards most of us haven't experienced before. And as usual, it is the most vulnerable who are bearing the brunt. As Councillor Valentin already explained, under this government, from 2011 to 2020, the number of children in poverty has increased by around 600,000. And this is even before the impacts of the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. 30% of children live in relative poverty. This doesn't just have an impact on their lives now, on their health, well-being and happiness today, but it limits their lifelong chances and opportunities. 9 million families who receive benefits are £500 worse off on average due to the government's decision to increase benefits by just 3.1% instead of with April's 9% inflation rate. The announced payments to help with energy bills are a one-off measure that is already insufficient, comes far too late for many people, and is a fig leaf to cover up the government's lack of a serious strategy to tackle the cost of living crisis. While the Conservatives are fighting amongst themselves to secure the Prime Minister post, our residents are facing the worst fall in living standards in generations. Rather than a bidding war about cutting taxes, we need an emergency budget to protect our pensioners, children, families from the coming onslaught. Rather than climate scepticism and calling in question the UK's net zero commitment, we need urgent help for residents in fuel poverty. Help with energy efficiency solutions, home insulation, heat pumps, issues the government has consistently failed to act on. The chickens are now coming home to roost. Rather than stirring up pointless culture wars, we need a serious government to come up with a thorough long-term economic plan that moves energy reliance away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy, ensure energy security and create better jobs. Meanwhile, Bedford Borough Council does continue to provide residents despite government cuts. For example, we still are one of the few councils to offer a 100% council tax reduction scheme to support vulnerable and hard-pressed households. However, the council itself is not immune to the effects of rising inflation. Our budgets are under relentless pressure and it becomes even more difficult to deliver the services our residents need and deserve. So, as we move into autumn and winter, our residents will face desperate choices, and the most vulnerable will suffer real hardship. They need more help. We all need more help. We need an emergency budget and a grown-up, serious government ready to deal with the challenges beforehand. Colleagues, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Wellington, would you like to sum up, please? Sorry, okay.
Questions.
Questions from Councillor Moon? Sorry, Coombs. Yeah.
And then me, Duncan, and then
Baywater. Yeah, thank you.
Yours a comment. There are two questions.
Okay. Councillor Baywater, you've got a question?
It's a comment.
Yeah. So it's yours a question.
Amendment? Okay. So, yeah. Okay.
You should do comments now.
Can we have the comments then do your amendment? Yeah.
Comments.
Comments with Councillor Baywater, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for bringing this motion. It's really important to talk about this. And it's good to see many long-standing green policies included in some of the solutions. Not that there are any easy solutions, so mass insulation and quality green jobs, for example. So obviously, as the councillor said, Thank you, Councillor Valentine. While we have a dysfunctional government and literally no leadership at all this summer, it's really up to the council and councils across the country to do everything they can to help households, and the households particularly that are worst affected by rising prices. So I'm grateful for measures that are already taken, for example, 100% council tax deductions and free school meals during the school holidays. According to well-respected money-saving expert Martin Lewis, the cost of living crisis, especially for basics like home food and home energy bills, could lead to more excess deaths in this country than the pandemic. So that brings us to issues like whether people are choosing heating or eating. So this is not an exaggeration, which many of the Conservatives nationally seem to think it is. And I want to thank also Public Health and partners for their initial work on the Fuel Poverty Steering Group, and also for their current work on the local food strategy, which was based on a Green Party motion which had cross-party support here. So the energy price cap, which has been mentioned, is predicted to rise 64% in October, taking a typical home energy bill to over £3,200. And it's going to rise again in January to probably £500 a year more than when May's help package was announced. And then we have British food price inflation. So that looks on course to hit 20% rise in the first quarter of next year. And that's according to Reuters and Citibank analysis. But this isn't just a cost of living crisis. This is what I want to emphasise. It's also a low wage crisis. So the minimum wage and benefits haven't kept up with inflation, and this is magnified for the many people locally working in the gig economy whose wages don't nearly keep up, being so low and so unreliable. I think perhaps the council also, with its meagre funds, needs to think creatively. So alongside things like the real living wage and measures already highlighted in the motion, it could be looking creatively, for example, at a basic local income, perhaps in a local currency, which could be spent only in local businesses. And instead of subsidising free parking, because that is public money, subsidising free parking, we could be using that money on reducing bus fares for those most in need who cannot afford to run a car and therefore literally cannot go where they need to go. But vitally, using collective pressure with other councillors, working together to call for an uplift in universal credit, because many of those people are in work, and also a moratorium on evictions for the late payment of rent, or we are going to see a mushrooming of homelessness in Bedford, and I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Baywater. Councillor Warren Bryan, do you have a comment or question?
It's a comment, if I may. Thank you. I have spoken to Councillor Valentine very briefly about this motion. I just wanted to raise the comment that I remember when I raised a maternity motion, I think it was back in 2020, the Mayor pointed out that as councillors we don't need to wait until full council to bring up issues which are important for our residents but are maybe dealt with by other people, or to approach other councillors, and Councillor Royden has reiterated that tonight. So I know we're all concerned about the cost of living. We've all been approached by residents, I'm quite sure. I know that I've been passing on comments to MPs, and I just want to say I hope that others have done as well, and we don't just wait for full council, and that we can all approach each other outside of full council as well to come together, because that, I think, might have more weight and be more productive.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby, do you have a comment or question?
Comment, Chair. I think bringing the motion tonight has been good to let us have a debate on it. I think that where I'm so disappointed, but then it's expected that I would be so disappointed that it's because it was put in by the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, it is just to have a knock at the government. There's a war going on in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. The food cannot get out. Fuel is in short supply. It is understandable that there is a cost of living crisis in England. There is one round most of the Western world. But I mean, as I say, I'm very happy that we have this debate tonight. I just wish that the question had been put in a more balanced way, that we could all three parties could agree it, because it is so important rather than scoring party political points. I mean,
I just downloaded this tonight. Tomorrow, the government that everybody is so unhappy about, and Boris has gone, and I'm quite happy Boris has gone. I've got no problems there. We'll see who else we get. But what's been put in place is that from tomorrow, over 8 million families will get a new cost of living payment. And it's one of two payments that will give them £650 a week. If you read your way through the rest of this, you'll find that there are other payments, and I'll read them all out to you if you want to stay here for 2 pages worth of it.
No, please, thank you.
The government is giving a lot of money, billions, particularly to those people in need. Do they need more? Yes. It is going to get worse. We all know it's going to get worse. And that's why it's, we need to have this conversation tonight. But please, let's be a little bit more balanced about it. There is, how much more to come? Well, you've got another fuel payment to come to everybody in due course. And I gather that other people can qualify on benefits, pensioners, disabled, universal credit, will all qualify for a lot more payments. So let's let's be more balanced here tonight. What you're doing is wrong. It's party political propaganda. It's not helpful to those people who need this money. It's not helpful to them. What we need to do is to find a proper way that this government will give them more help. But it isn't going to come from this chamber tonight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cole. Sorry, pardon me.
Yeah, can you hear me? Oh, is that okay? You can hear me? Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll keep this as brief as I can. It's been a long evening and it is very warm. And I'll try and take the political side out of it if I can, but whether we like it or not, this is a cost of living crisis and that is political. Anyway, I fully support this motion and I believe, who wouldn't? There might be members on this council who feel this government have given financial help to people throughout COVID and continue to do so. And I'm not going to entirely disagree. However, more financial help is required and the support needs to be targeted at those who are struggling the most. This is a crisis and it's going to get worse before we can even think about a recovery. Who would have thought that people who live in a country with the 5th, maybe 6th largest economy in the world would have to rely on food banks? I've even been told that a senior minister has recently suggested we should be proud of our food banks. Wow, that's a reflection on the times that we're in and how standards and morals have declined. Mr. Speaker, this country is in a financial crisis, which means people who live in Bedford Borough are in a crisis and struggling to pay their everyday bills. The residents we all represent need help, and they need that help now. Recent research suggests that 1 in 6 families are seriously struggling with their finances, forcing them into eating lower quality food, selling their possessions, or cancelling insurance policies. This is in 2022. Not only is this unacceptable, it's terrifying. The problem we have is that we find ourselves in the middle of a cost of living crisis whilst we have a dysfunctional government whose agenda appears to be self-survival as opposed to finding solutions to get people through this crisis. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, the country is stuck in a rut whilst people we represent struggle to make ends meet. But this must not deter us in any way of getting this motion through tonight. Time is of the essence as Parliament goes into summer recess at the end of this week and will not return until September. That's why we need to get behind this motion and send a very clear and urgent message to the government. I urge every member here tonight to put party politics to one side, because I think that's what I am doing. I'm trying to do that. But it's political. To one side so we can try to help the people who need help. And let's not forget, many of those people who elect us as their councillors and would expect nothing less. This is a crisis and we need to act now. Please support this motion that's in front of you tonight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Meader. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Johnson has not gone. He has 8 or 9 weeks left. And in those 8 or 9 weeks, the average household will pay £540 in energy bills. In those 8 weeks that he is still in power. £540. At the moment, they're probably not be heating. They're probably putting fans on, putting so much ice in the ice machine that they can try and cool themselves down. There'll be people buying air conditioning machines because the heat is so hot, and we know that will affect them. This motion is about protecting our residents that will have to choose between buying the school uniform in September, between buying food, between going on holiday, about heating the house, about keeping cool. That's why it's important, and that's why it is political. And I think the giveaway line is, from you, is we need to find a proper way. You ended up by saying we need to find a proper way. So I take that as the way we're doing it at the moment is not proper. It is piecemeal. We have one thing after another. There is money, but it's not a concerted effort. It's not an actual view about how we're going to deal with long term. We know the bills are coming. We know they're going to increase even more. This motion addresses that. The people that can do the most about that are the government, who are increasing the revenue takes with the VAT on increasing fuel charges, increasing food charges, and they are actually getting more tax and actually stoking that inflation, but also stoking the cost of living crisis. The take on tax and VAT increases as the price increases, and we need to take that into effect. And the government needs to concentrate that on not on who will vote for who in tonight or tomorrow's election.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, the Mayor named me. I'd like to respond.
Sure.
I quite appreciate all that you've said, but when you look at your motion, I think I'm getting the impression here that things need to happen, and they need to happen very, very quickly. When I look at the 3 points of your motion, you're talking about people going hungry now, and that mustn't happen. But this is the thrust of your motion. But when you look at the 3 points that you've got there, yes, an emergency budget, and I think that's what an incoming Prime Minister will do. I have no absolute knowledge that will happen, but I hope very much it does. But the second point is roll out a rapid programme of home insulation. I think that's a wonderful idea, but it isn't going to deal with the crisis that's coming over the next 2 or 3 months that you've been just selling to me as being terribly frightening. And third point is design a more thorough long-term economic plan that moves away from fossil fuels. Well, the further we move, and we must do that, but in the context of the next few months, everybody through Europe is firing up their coal-fired power stations to try and make up for the shortage of gas from Russia. So the two of those 3 points in there are not immediate. They are not going to solve this crisis straight away. So I think the point of your comments to me are wrong in some respects. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor McHugh.
Thank you. I'd like to be brief, but unfortunately so many points have come up that I can't be. For instance, about the fossil fuels, the government has written to energy producers in the UK asking them to fire up West Burton A power station. It's not just across Europe, it's here. And the point about that, yes, there are world factors, but this is also nationally driven. The situation we're in of so many people in poverty, so many working people who can't afford their rent and their childcare. That situation is driven by a lot of national choices, partly by the electorate, and Conservative choices. And if you keep making the bad choices, then these emergency actions will always fail. So, for instance, we can come back to home insulation. As I say, I'd like to be brief, so I've just got 5 points. The first one is this, we didn't foresee this leadership election quite so soon. And I thought the funniest bit so far, the most astonishing bit, was the complete honesty shown by Suella Braverman. When asked how she would cut taxes, she rolled out the lazy trope that there are lots of British people on welfare who should get off their backsides and work. So Suella Braverman clearly is unaware that 60% of universal credit recipients are in work. And that's the truth of it. Working families are in poverty. She's also clearly unaware of the crisis of unaffordable childcare. How is a parent meant to go out and undertake more hours of work if they can't afford the childcare, let alone the unaffordable housing costs? And again, this is choices. It's not just a mystery, it's choices. It's to do with accepting dirty Russian money into the London housing market, which drives houses. It's also to do with every balmy idea that Michael Gove came up with, for instance, allowing everyone. What was it going to be? Well, we could go on for a long time. My second point is that when people talk about, so we're calling for a low budget, and in fact it's an emergency budget, and in fact it's very timely to call for that. And the answer to the situation we're in is not low tax. Again, low tax is what they're talking about. They're talking about cutting the state. The British people doesn't need the state cut right now. If cutting the state means fewer services, we have complete dysfunction across the system of national services that we have grown up with and that we expect to be there. Why are barristers on strike? Why are the courts backed up? And it's not all COVID either. Why are there no GPs? It was foreseen, the age of GPs was foreseen for ages. That has been talked about for a long time, the fact that they were going to retire in their 50s. That's been foreseen in a long time. Another interesting thing is we've got a bulge in school-age children coming through who will need teachers. Ironically, the age of the age group that would teach them is a small age group. Why isn't the government doing something? Why, that just needs planning. That needs planning, it needs incentive. All of these things are a failure of the government institutions. The third point, which is the one that makes me almost angriest of all, is raising national insurance. National insurance is a regressive tax. And when months ago, one Sunday morning, they wheeled out one of those identikit ministers to say, oh yes, national insurance, people who earn more pay more. Yes, in absolute terms, people who earn more pay more. But in percentage terms, people who earn more pay a lower percentage. And it was wicked to put up national insurance, even if they then tinkered with the thresholds. Because if you earn over £50,280, your rate of national insurance goes down from 12% to 2%. Now, probably all the people slogging away at the lower end of the wage scale have no idea that if they were to earn over £50,000, they would actually pay less. That's a wicked tax. We should not have such regressive taxes. My fourth point is about fuel poverty. Again, consistently making bad choices leads to these crises. And it was in 2015 that David Cameron and George Osborne, amongst trashing lots of other green policies that they had worked on with the Liberal Democrats, that they got rid of the government policy that every new home from 2016 should be a net zero. If you just think about that, that means we could have had 6 years of building net zero homes. So you don't have to scratch your heads, how can this be done? We could have been doing that for 6 years. And we would have been world leaders in those green industries, in retrofitting homes and in building homes that were net zero. Just think of that. Think of the money that families would have saved on their energy. My final bit is to take up a previous point, and it's not about, the handouts are very welcome, I can tell you, because I've been round to several people to help them with their applications. They're extremely welcome, even though the idea that the council can pay money into everyone's account is extremely problematic and shows a lack of understanding of what councils do and the data that they hold. But bits of money, as welcome as they are, do not replace a consistent income on which you can live, which sort of brings us back to universal credit, that the cut to universal credit should have been reversed. So that's what I have to say. I've been as brief as I can.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Come back to Councillor Coombs for the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move the amendment that I circulated earlier. I think this debate has been quite unedifying, and there's been quite some mixed messages coming from the different groups. Councillor Mead is saying he's not being political. The Mayor saying, yes, it is political, and I do wish that they'd make their minds up. In moving this amendment, I have to say, I did offer both the Labour and Liberal Democrat groups earlier today the opportunity to have an all-party motion where we wouldn't have necessarily had to have this acrimony. And the decline of that opportunity does suggest to me that the Labour and Liberal Democrat groups are more interested in finger-jabbing and having a go at the government than addressing the very real issue of the cost of living. And it is a very real issue, and it affects, as some members have said, it affects a great many people. And people are hurting, and they want things done. They don't just want a lot of politicians, the typical hot air that comes from politicians saying, why don't you do this? No, why don't you do that? We could have actually done something much more constructive this evening, but it seems that we are having to have this argument about whose fault things are. This motion, whilst addressing a really important point, it does read like it was a rushed response and written up half an hour before it was due to be handed in. It presents a very lopsided argument. And I'm sorry, Councillor Valentine, you do make some good points in your speech, you do. But you presented a really, really lopsided argument, and there is rather a poor grasp of facts in what is in this motion and limited attention to detail. And then, of course, in order to get this agreed by the Liberal Democrats, you had to say wonderful things about the great leader, Dave Hodgson, because we all have to worship this cult of personality and say how wonderful he is and what fantastic things that he has done for Bedford. And I will be honest, yes, there are some good things that this council has done. Yeah, the council has made some measures to address the cost of living crisis. One of them is a bit bizarre. In this motion, one of the claims is that by putting up the council tax, Bedford residents are somehow £97 better off. I don't know quite how twisted your logic is that you can put the council tax up and make people better off. That's a rather weird one. It beggars belief, and it's just not true, and a rather bizarre claim to make. And we need to be more honest with people. The fact is, I'm sure the Labour and Liberal Democrats will pass this motion. You know, if you have the numbers, you can pass a motion saying a giraffe is an armadillo. But the fact is, you need to deal with facts, and people need more honesty in politics. So, people need more honesty in politics. From all parties, Mr. Deputy Mayor. You may well scoff, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I do like your sense of humour, but from all parties we need more honesty. So, as part of this amendment, I will give you some facts. The Conservative government has increased the rate of national insurance by 1.25% a year, as has been mentioned. But that's to fund the NHS and social care. And we've all been crying out for extra funding for the NHS and for help with social care. So that 1.25% is paying us something that everybody in this chamber has already been asking for. And then the national insurance threshold, the rate at which people start paying. Which Councillor McHugh referenced very briefly, but that has gone up from £9,880 a year to £12,570. That's an increase of more than 27% in the threshold. It brings it in line with the income tax threshold, and it removes, and these are facts, this is not hot air or political banter, facts, it removes 2.2 million people from paying national insurance at all. 2.2 million people removed from paying national insurance. A typical employee will save £330 a year, and the combined effects of these changes, according to the BBC, no friend of the Conservative Party, I'll thank you, the BBC says that anybody earning under £34,000 a year will pay less national insurance. Anyone paying more than £34,000 a year will pay more. The government has also, and Councillor Rigby referenced this in his comments, has introduced a cost of living payment for more than 8 million. Sorry, I'm doing the same thing as you, Deputy Mayor, getting my millions and my billions confused. 8 million low-income households. Again, I'll say that. 8 million low-income households are going to get this cost of living payment, which starts tomorrow, £326, and will go up to £650 a year. The government's also ensuring that pensioner households will receive an extra £300 this winter to help with rising energy costs, and those on disability benefits will receive an extra £150 in September. All UK households will see their energy bills discounted by £400 under another cost of living measure announced by the government. So, yes, there are real problems, and people really are feeling the pinch. I don't think anybody in this chamber would doubt that. But measures are being taken by central government, and there are some external factors that are affecting this. The war in the Ukraine cannot be dismissed. It is affecting food prices, and it is affecting energy costs. And, you know, Councillor McHugh mentioned about the power plant that the government is starting up. You know, occasionally you need to have measures in order to have energy security. Because what do you have? You don't have the energy, and then you don't have security of supply, and we either freeze or we pay through the nose for it. You know, the Germans are finding this. They scrapped their nuclear power plant when they went into bed with the Green Party, I believe it was, and they scrapped their nuclear power, and now they are wholly dependent on Russian gas. And that's a terrible place to be. So there are external factors at work. We as a group, in summary, we are happy to call on to support the calls on government to call an emergency budget. We don't have any issue with the last 3 points. I think you will get an emergency budget. I think, bearing in mind all of the discussion from the candidates to be Prime Minister, I think you will get an emergency budget. And also, we're happy to support the calls for a programme of home insulation and energy efficiency with a robust plan for addressing fossil fuels and renewables. So, if you wanted to have this motion passed and agreed with the points you wanted to make, you could have done it by just taking out all the pointless party political claptrap that you put in your motion. The rest of it is really just posturing tosh. And I'm pleased to be able to help you balancing the argument by putting forward this amendment and telling you the facts that the government has made measures to address the cost of living crisis, as has this council and the mayor. Yeah? I'll give credit where it's due. I'll give an honest picture. The government and this council have made measures to address the cost of living crisis, and we all need to do more. That's quite clear. So I think what we should be doing in proposing this amendment, it calls on all of us to work collaboratively across parties to address the rising cost of living for the benefit of Bedford residents, which is, I am certain, what they would want us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the amendment.
Thank you. Is amendment seconded? Okay. Questions, yes? Councillor Sampson, do you have a question or comment?
I did have a comment on the motion itself, not this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very keen to put party politics aside, and that's why I am labelled, if you didn't know, an independent. I will go further and say that when the amendment was handed to me some 20 minutes into this meeting from the benches in front of me, I was very hopeful that this would be balanced and putting party politics aside. I heard from the other side that this was an attempt, this amendment, to bring three parties together. I would point out that there is actually a fourth party and none. and I don't know if the fourth party was cited with the amendment, but I got it 20 minutes in. I was encouraged that we were going to have a balanced amendment, and so I've spent a little bit of time reading it. And I want to play back the words "deal with the facts," more honesty, and balancing the argument. My question is, I assume the Chancellor that's been in post under a week, still in post, but I therefore assume the previous Chancellor, the Right Honourable Rishi Sunak, is well known to the Chamber. Are you aware, because it's not in your amendment, which I was hoping you might have picked up, are you aware that the previous Chancellor has actually frozen the tax allowances for 5 years until 2026?
I am aware of various tax allowances. Don't ask me to quote them all, but I have given you a balanced amendment, Doug, and please don't pretend that you're independent. We all know that you're in the Mayor's pocket. That's very obvious. You may as well have a Liberal Democrat written all over you, quite frankly. But no, I don't think it's relevant to the amendment. The amendment is a balanced amendment, and I tried to address the imbalance in the original motion, Councillor McMurdo.
Thank you. We just need to debate the amendment more, then we go back on to question. My apologies, it got a bit of a mixed-up wire. So, is there anything else you'd like to add to your debate?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine, thank you.
Speaker, I was named.
Yes, you was. Yeah. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, on the amendment. Yeah.
No, not yet.
Don't do nothing, Chair. Sorry. I think to attack one's policies is befitting of this chamber. I think to attack one's personality is unbecoming to this chamber, and we should try not to do that. I try not to attack individuals and what their personality and how they deal with that, and I think the rest of us should do the same. In terms of the policies put forward, it's all very well saying the money, and we've said it's grateful, but Martin Lewis has said that the increase in fuel for an average household would be £1,680, which is more than anybody's getting from the government. That is before you do fuel for your vehicle, food for your children, and what this motion is saying, that we can't wait 8 weeks, because there will be a budget, because a new Chancellor will bring a budget in, and it won't be an emergency budget, it'll be called whatever it wants to be. But actually 8 weeks, as I said before, is a substantial bill for hosting costs, for fuel costs for your vehicle if you've got one, for food. This is an emergency. 8 weeks is too long to wait. I haven't wagged my finger once.
Thank you. Councillor Burley.
Thank you, Chair. The question I want to ask is, you put in your amendment, delete all after the highest level in 40 years. I'd also like to point out, but I didn't get as much notice of this as Councillor McMurdo. Didn't realise it had been circulated, so I just had to ask for a copy from our acting group leader. So if I look where it says the highest level in 40 years, are you saying that all those bullet points afterwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet points in that paragraph, which you want to delete? So am I right in thinking that you don't think those statements are true? And is it, perhaps am I being cynical if I look, because I tried to see where the word government came in, and it comes in in those several items in that paragraph, and you use the phrase party political claptrap. And are you deleting that because you think that's party political claptrap? Because those bullet points didn't actually happen and are not happening. Could I have an answer to say, are you deleting those because you don't believe they're true?
Sorry, you can hear me. Sorry. Thank you for the question, Councillor Burley. No, the reason that I wanted to delete those was because, as I said, I think this is an overtly party political motion. There's a lot in there that is real, and again, we're talking about the petty arguments between ourselves. We're not talking about the real issues that are affecting people, and I think anybody who is suffering, looking at this, would just be horrified by all of us, quite frankly. Some of the things, one of the things in there, the national insurance increased by 1.25 percentage points. That's a fact. You can't argue with that. And I incorporated that point in my amendment. What I tried to do with the amendment is put something there which people can agree with. The amendment, unlike the original motion, which I think is partisan and designed to finger point and to make the case. I don't know, you may all be up for reselection soon, so you've got to make the case to the Maoists of Momentum as to how good you were at attacking the Tories. And this is your evidence. But, I want to ensure that we have a motion that everybody could get around and support and agree to, that made the case that there was a very real issue and that this council and central government are doing what they can in order to address that. It seems there's one side, or two sides possibly, of this council chamber that just wants to finger point and make a partisan political point. And that is not my side of the chamber. Councillor Burley.
I don't think I've had my question answered, if you don't mind me saying, because you haven't replaced any of the stuff that you want to delete by any. No, but you haven't. I asked you quite clearly, do you not agree that they are true facts of what has happened? And all you said is you want to even it up. So if you wanted to even it up, you would leave all of that in because it's true, and then you would add the other bits in that you want to even up. And that is not what you have done. So you haven't answered my question, which is why do you want to delete all of that?
Councillor Burley, I thought I made myself perfectly clear, but if it wasn't clear, then I will repeat for your benefit. Let's take some of these points. Yes, the increase of 1.25 percentage points, that is included in the amendment. It clearly states the government's increased the rate of national insurance 1.25% this year. That is in my amendment. Yes? The government also raised taxes to their highest levels in 70 years. Well, the tax, as I recall it, in the 1970s and 80s was 83%. That was under a Labour government, I might remind you. The people were paying top rates of tax of 83% and on unearned income an additional 15% on top. So that's why we had all that sort of flight of capital. So it's a very difficult and rather generalistic point to say the government have raised taxes to their highest levels in 70 years, because you can pick bits apart and say this is not the highest tax in 70 years. Or you can say that with inflation and a growing economy, you're always going to have higher taxes because you always have higher revenues. So are you talking, again, this is why the motion is no good. Are you talking about rates of income tax? Are you talking about thresholds? Are you talking about the tax gathered? You're not clear because you just wanted to rush this out and score points. Yes? That's all it was about. Interest rates have increased dramatically since 2021. Yes, interest rates have increased. Yes, I have a mortgage. Yes, I've seen the increase go up. But again, that's not a government thing because, your party gave the Bank of England financial independence. So the Bank of England now deals with interest rates, so that's not a government thing. But interest rates have gone up and people are paying more in their mortgages. So ultimately, I think what I've tried to do throughout my amendment is help you, because you put together a motion that is just so badly thought through, so partisan in nature, and so lacking in real empathy for people struggling, that you've been blinded by your own sort of political bias. I have tried to help you with my amendment.
me think the Tory party do protest too much, that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Really do. And condescending is not the word. It really is over the top.
Do we have any more questions? No? We move on to comments on this amendment. Councillor Simpson, I believe you had.
I just wanted to, I wanted to comment on the motion itself. Is this the right time to do that? No, I didn't think so.
Comment on the amendment.
Anybody else for comments?
Comment on the amendment. I would like the Chamber to know, and I want it well recorded, that I am independent and I am not in the pockets of the Mayor, and I want that record to be set absolutely straight and clear. Okay? And I would like that recorded in the minutes. Might I just go on and say that I genuinely thought this would be balanced, and I listened to you, Councillor Coombs. I would like to. I thought it would be balanced, and that you might highlight something that is very close to my heart about the allowances are frozen until 2026, with the cost of living rises predicted to be double figures by the end of this year. That will have a serious impact on taxpayers at the lowest level very, very quickly and very, very seriously. And therefore, your amendment being balanced isn't your words. Deal with the facts, more honesty, and balance in the argument. The omission of the allowances, I think, is an oversight in the substantive motion if we get to that, but I will forgive people for that. But your balanced approach, your balanced approach is not bringing the facts forward. I will not, as an independent, be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Anybody have comments? Councillor Valentine.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's getting late, and we're all very warm, and I'm proposing that the motion now be put. And the reason for this is, I've heard what you say, Councillor Coombs, and I would just like to give a little bit of background. You said that the motion was put together hastily. I've been thinking about it for the last 2 or 3 months, actually. It comes directly from my experience of working with children and families, talking with officers frequently, getting the weekly stats, and seeing what's happening to children, young people and families in Bedford Borough. So that's the background to it. But it wasn't party political in the first instance. And it's only very recently that we talked with the Lib Dems, who had something similar in their minds, and that's why it's a joint motion. So that's where we are. And I would say, in putting the points you've made, some of what the government has done, it's just like the Grand Old Duke of York, isn't it? It's like putting up national insurance and then pulling back on the threshold. So I don't think it's a very convincing argument. But as I say, I suggest now that the motion is now be put, and that we determine this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Valentine. Thank you. Okay. Right. We are voting on amendment, so all in favour of amendment, show hands, please. Okay, thank you. Can you show all against the amendment, please? The motion is carried.
No, it's not. The amendment is lost.
Oh, that is it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my first meeting. I appreciate you being patient. Thank you for that. And the motion has been lost. Thank you.
Amendment, Mr. Speaker.
The amendment has been lost. Thank you.
Now you need to move voting back on the motion.
Yeah.
So you need to allow Councillor Sampson.
We are moving back on the motion. Can I ask Councillor Valentine to add anything? It goes to you.
I don't wish to add anything at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know if I could...
Councillor Simpson?
Thank you. Sorry, it's a brief one and it won't take too long, but it's never been more relevant. Just this week I've had a resident on the phone complaining about the living crisis. So this is really hitting home, I'm sure, not just for us, but them as well. I just wanted to pass on my support for this motion and welcome the debate. Party politics aside or not, this is an extremely important motion. We must look at the reality of the situation, and yes, there is a war in Ukraine and so on, but do you really think my residents would appreciate that as an answer and not give them an answer which shows what is coming in the long term to help them? This is a squeeze on everyone, and never has the next generation been more afraid of what the future holds. So to get the long-term answers, please pass the message on of balance and order to the central government, who can really help solve this crisis. Because yes, this might be the second or third public payment to help with heating costs, but we also live in a time which has a government holding its third leadership contest. So comments of balance could be more appropriate elsewhere. As much as what can be said for what the government and who is doing what on what side, we are just not seeing the results. So I ask this council to support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sampson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that it's taken the Labour Party about 3 months to put this together, but they didn't need to. All they needed to go was to the Labour Party campaign website, cost of living crisis, top line, section 1, campaign guide, section 2. It was all there for you, how to run a political campaign on a cost of living crisis. I'm sorry, but you've made a mockery of this evening.
Councillor Valentine, would you like to sum up, please?
I've got nothing further to add at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is before the council. All those in favour, please show. All those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. That concludes the item 21. There being no other item of council business, I declare this meeting closed. I would sincerely like to apologise for this mess-up and getting the wrong names. Thank you very much. Councillor Graham.
Mr. Speaker, could I just make a final statement before we break up? I bit my tongue during the response to Councillor Bywater's question to the Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Graham, I think the meeting's closed now, so...
I was going to agree with the Mayor's statement earlier and ask him to speak to his Deputy to not be so patronising and aggressive in his answers
Thank you for your comment
to questions.
Councillor Graham, meeting is closed. My apologies. Thank you.
Raise the outstanding